Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive on atomic habits. We're going to be taking excerpts from the book and really breaking them down, seeing how we can use them to build better habits.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was so interesting about this book is how it really challenges our thinking when it comes to success. We tend to focus on these big changes, right? These like dramatic shifts.
Right.
But Atomic Habits really argues that it's those small, consistent actions that make a difference over time.
It's like that analogy in the book about the plane taking off from LA headed for New York City.
Right.
If the pilot just adjusts the course just a tiny bit, like 3.5 degrees south, you wouldn't even notice at first.
Right.
But over the course of the entire flight, you'd end up in DC instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The point is that even those seemingly insignificant choices that we make every single day, they can have a huge impact over time. And to illustrate this, the author uses his own experience as an example. He talks about how he had to relearn basic movements after a serious injury. He had a broken nose, facial fractures, the whole works. And he had to really focus on those tiny wins, like just walking in a straight line.
Yeah, and I think that's such a powerful example because it shows that even when we're starting from a place of setbacks, we can still achieve remarkable things as long as we focus on those small, consistent gains.
Absolutely. And that leads us to one of the most surprising claims in the book. Goals aren't the key to long-term success. Systems are.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. We're always told to set goals. Goals are important.
Right.
But the author makes this really compelling argument that goals can actually be limiting.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more about this. Why does he think that?
He outlines three main problems with goals. The first is that winners and losers often have the same goals. So achieving a goal doesn't guarantee lasting success. Okay, think about it. Two people could have the goal of running a marathon.
Right.
But only one of them might actually create a training plan and stick to it and cross that finish line.
So it's not just about the goal itself, it's about the process and the system that gets you there.
Exactly.
Okay.
The second problem with goals is that we tend to view them as temporary solutions. You hit the goal, and then what? So it creates this cycle of constantly chasing the next thing without ever really feeling satisfied.
It's like you finally reach your goal weight.
Right.
But then you go back to your old eating habits because you haven't actually built a sustainable system.
Exactly. And then the final issue with goals is that they can restrict our happiness. We fall into this trap of thinking, I'll be happy when I'll be happy when I achieve X, which means we're always postponing our happiness.
We're always putting it off into the future.
Exactly. So instead of fixating on that specific outcome,
Right.
we should be focused on building systems that support our desired habits.
Okay, so we need to shift our focus from goals to systems. But how do we actually go about building those systems?
That's where the 4 stages of habit formation come in. The book breaks it down into cue, craving, response, and reward.
Right.
It's a fascinating look at how habits are literally wired into our brains.
Yeah, and this is where the science gets really interesting because it's all connected to the brain's reward system and that dopamine hit that we get when we do something pleasurable.
Exactly.
And I love that example that he gives in the book about the baby seagulls. Have you heard this one?
Yeah.
So they instinctively peck at the red dot on their mother's beak to signal that they're hungry.
Right.
And what scientists discovered is that they'll peck at anything with a red dot, even a fake beak.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It shows how these cues and responses are just so deeply ingrained, even in animals.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So if we want to build better habits, we need to understand this 4-step process and how we can kind of manipulate it to work in our favor.
For sure.
So if we think about those first 2 stages, the cue and the craving, what are some strategies that we can use to make those good habits more obvious and appealing?
One technique he talks about is habit stacking.
Okay.
And that's where you link a new habit that you want to build to an existing habit that you already have.
Okay.
So for example, if you want to start drinking more water,
Yeah.
you could make a rule to drink a glass of water every time you brush your teeth.
I've actually done that, and it works.
It does. It really works.
Yeah, it takes away the guesswork of like, when do I do this new habit? How do I do it?
Right. You're already doing something
It's
consistently.
attached to something else.
Exactly. And the book offers a lot of other really practical tips like making a morning routine list or placing visual cues around your environment to remind you of your habits.
And speaking of environment, the book really emphasizes how much our surroundings actually shape our behavior.
For sure.
It's not just about willpower, it's about setting ourselves up for success.
Right.
By designing our environment in a way that makes good habits easier and bad habits harder.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He even gives the equation, behavior is a function of the person in their environment. BFPE. for short,
Right.
to really emphasize this point.
It's like you're more likely to snack on junk food if it's just sitting out on the counter,
Right?
than if it's tucked away in a cupboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're more likely to work out if your gym clothes are laid out and ready to go
Right.
than if they're buried at the bottom of your drawer.
Exactly.
And this concept isn't just theoretical either. It mentions a fascinating example of Japanese electronics manufacturers in the 1970s.
Okay.
They redesigned their workspaces to minimize wasted motion, and it led to increased efficiency and more reliable products. So even in a professional setting, environment design can have a huge impact.
Okay, I'm convinced I'm sold on the power of environment design.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that moment when you actually have to do the habit.
Okay.
How do we make sure that we stick with it, especially when that motivation starts to fade?
Right. Well, that's where the response and reward stages of habit formation come in.
Oh.
And the key here is to make the habit easy and satisfying.
Okay, is this where the 2-minute rule comes in?
Yes.
I've heard of this concept before, and I'm really curious to hear more about it.
So the 2-minute rule basically says that you break down any new habit into its simplest form, something that takes less than 2 minutes to do. The idea is to make it so easy that you can't say no.
Okay.
So instead of trying to run a marathon, you start by just putting on your running shoes.
Okay.
Or instead of writing an entire chapter of a book, you just commit to writing one sentence.
That's brilliant because it just removes all those mental barriers that we put up.
Exactly.
And it makes it almost impossible to fail. And once you've started, it's much easier to just keep going.
Exactly.
And I think about that story in the book about the man who wanted to build a cleaning habit. He started by just resetting the room after each activity, you
Right.
know, putting the remote back on the TV stand, folding the blanket, and eventually it snowballed into this more comprehensive cleaning routine.
Right. It's all about those small wins adding up over time.
Right.
But what's even more interesting is how this ties into this deeper concept of identity and how it influences our habits.
Okay, so now we're getting really deep here.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about changing our actions. We're talking about changing who we believe we are at our core.
Precisely. The book argues that our habits shape our identity, and our identity shapes our habits.
It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. So, for example, if you consistently work out, you start to see yourself as an athletic person,
Right.
which makes you more likely to continue exercising.
Right. You embody that identity.
Exactly. And there's this amazing story in the book about Laszlo Polgar, a man who raised his 3 daughters to be chess prodigies.
Okay.
And he did this by creating an environment where chess was a central part of their lives, and it shaped their beliefs and their identities.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of his daughters went on to achieve remarkable success in the chess world.
Wow.
It's a powerful illustration of how our environment and the habits we cultivate can profoundly influence who we become.
So instead of trying to force ourselves to do things that we don't really believe we're capable of, we need to shift our focus to embodying the identity of the person who already does those things.
Exactly. It's a mindset shift.
Yeah.
It's not about faking it till you make it. It's about believing it so you become it.
Wow. This is really giving me a whole new perspective on habit formation.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the power of tiny gain systems over goals, the 4 stages of habit formation, how our environment and our identity play crucial roles in all of this. What other mind-blowing insights does this book have in store for us?
Oh, there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
Buckle up because we're just getting started.
I'm ready. Let's dive in. So we've been talking about how our habits shape our identity, but I'm wondering, like, how do we keep those habits from becoming stale and boring?
Right, because even the best habits can start to feel like a chore after a while.
Exactly.
Well, the book actually addresses this with the concept of the Goldilocks rule.
Oh.
And it states that we experience peak motivation when we're working on tasks that are just the right level of difficulty. Not too hard, not too easy.
The sweet spot.
Exactly.
Like Goldilocks.
Exactly. Like if a task is too easy, we get bored.
Right.
If it's too hard, we get discouraged.
Makes sense.
So it's about finding that Goldilocks zone where we're challenged just enough to stay engaged.
So how do we apply this to our habits?
Well, it ties into the importance of variable rewards in keeping us motivated. The book uses the example of slot machines.
Oh, okay.
You never know when you're going to win,
Right.
so you keep playing. It's the unpredictability.
Keeps you hooked.
Exactly.
So how do we, I don't want my workout routine to feel like a slot machine.
Right, of course not.
Huh?
But the idea is to find ways to keep your habits fresh and engaging. So maybe you mix up your workouts, you
Okay.
try new recipes, or you explore different genres of books.
Right.
The point is to add some variety and prevent boredom.
Okay, so it's like adding a little spice to our routine.
Exactly.
Keep things interesting.
Spice it up.
Okay, I like that. But what about those times when even variable rewards aren't enough? How do we push through when we're just not feeling it?
Well, at some point it comes down to discipline
Mhm.
and embracing the less glamorous side of habit formation.
Mm.
The book quotes an elite coach who says, "The difference between professionals and amateurs is that professionals stick to the schedule even when they don't feel like it."
So it's about showing up consistently even when it's not exciting.
Right, even when it's not glamorous.
Right.
It's about being a pro, not an amateur.
I love that.
It's about trusting that mastery is built through consistent effort day after day.
So how do we cultivate that professional mindset?
Well, the book highlights the power of habit tracking as a way to stay motivated and accountable.
Okay.
So by keeping a visual record of your progress, you're constantly reminded of your commitment.
Right.
And you get that satisfaction of marking off each day that you stick to your habit.
Oh, I'm such a visual person.
Me too.
Like I have to see it to believe it,
Exactly.
checking off those
It
boxes.
feels so good.
Or like seeing those streaks getting longer.
Yeah, it's like a visual representation of all your hard work.
Exactly.
And the book mentions 3 key benefits of habit tracking.
Okay.
The first is that it makes the habit obvious. You can't ignore it when it's staring you in the face.
Okay, true.
The second is that it provides evidence of your progress. It's easy to get discouraged when you feel like you're not making any headway.
Yeah, you feel like you're spinning your wheels. Like, am I actually getting anywhere?
Right. But when you can actually see how far you've come,
Right.
it's much easier to stay motivated.
Okay, what's the third benefit?
The third benefit is that it just feels good. It's like giving yourself a little reward for each step you take.
It's like a dopamine hit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's positive reinforcement
Yeah.
that makes you more likely to stick with the habit.
So we've got our habit tracker, we're checking things off every day, we're feeling good. But inevitably, like, life happens, we get off track.
Of course. We're human.
So how do we handle those setbacks without getting discouraged?
That's where accountability comes in.
Okay.
The book really emphasizes the value of having an accountability partner, someone who can support you and help you stay on course.
Yeah, it could be like a workout buddy
Yeah.
or a writing partner
For sure.
or even just a friend who checks in on you.
Exactly. Someone who's got your back.
And for those who are like super serious about building new habits,
Right.
the book suggests creating a habit contract.
Yes.
Okay, a contract.
A contract.
That sounds serious.
It can be,
Yeah.
but it can also be incredibly effective.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, it's a written agreement that outlines your desired habit,
Okay.
the specific actions you'll take, and the consequences of not following through.
Oh, so there are consequences.
Yes, there are consequences.
Uh-huh.
And the book shares the story of Brian Harris, an entrepreneur who used a habit contract to help him lose weight. He had his wife and his trainer act as his accountability partners,
Oh, wow.
and the contract specified financial penalties for missing his daily targets.
Okay, so he put his money where his mouth is. Wow, that's commitment.
It is. It's
Yeah.
about leveraging social support and maybe even a little bit of fear to make those good habits easier.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the importance of systems, the 4 stages of habit formation environment, design, the Goldilocks rule habit, tracking the power of accountability. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else from Atomic Habits that you think is crucial for our listeners to know?
One final takeaway that I think is really important is this idea of finding your game, a field of competition where the odds are in your favor.
Okay.
So the book argues that habits are easier when they align with your natural abilities and interests.
So it's about like playing to our strengths and focusing on areas where we're naturally inclined to excel.
Exactly. We all have unique talents and predispositions.
Right.
And by directing our efforts toward areas where we have a natural advantage, we're more likely to experience success and satisfaction.
So instead of forcing ourselves to do things that feel like a constant uphill battle, we can kind of lean into our strengths and build habits that feel more effortless and enjoyable.
Precisely. It's about working with our natural inclinations, not against them.
I like that.
Now, the book doesn't explicitly address this next point, but it's something that I think is worth pondering.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
So if we think about all of these insights,
Mm-hmm.
about habits and systems and identity and environment, it raises this really interesting question. Could consciously designing your habits in your environment be the key to not only achieving your goals, but also crafting the identity that you want?
Wow, that's a really powerful idea. It's like we're not just creatures of habit, we're actually architects of our own identities
Exactly.
through the habits that we cultivate.
It really is a profound idea to consider I mean, we've always been told that we are what we repeatedly do, but what if we flip that around? What if by consciously choosing the habits that we want to embody, we could actually shape who we become?
That's incredible. It's like
Mhm.
we're taking all of these tools and strategies from Atomic Habits and using them not just for self-improvement, but for like self-creation.
Exactly. It's about becoming the authors of our own lives,
Right.
one small habit at a time.
I love that. This deep dive has been such an eye-opening experience. It's
Yeah.
like completely changed my perspective on habit formation.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how much wisdom and practical advice can be packed into a single book.
Absolutely. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our journey with Atomic Habits. These insights are going to stick with me for a long time.
I think they will. And for you listening out there, I encourage you to continue exploring these concepts on your own. Pick up a copy of Atomic Habits and dive deeper into the science of small changes that lead to remarkable results.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not about overnight transformations. It's about those tiny, consistent actions
Right.
that compound over time.
Those Atomic Habits.
It's exactly. Start small. Stay consistent and embrace the power of those tiny gains to create the identity and the life you want.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into Atomic Habits. Until next time, keep those habits atomic.